Hi again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Alumni Chats, a weekly podcast featuring alumni from the Department of Broadcasting and Journalism here at Western Illinois University. My name is Buzz Hoon. I'm the host of the podcast. I'm also the interim dean for the College of Fine Arts and Communication. Today, I'm talking with Mark Nootbaar from the class of 1992. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Hey, thank you very much. 92, that's a long time ago, isn't it?
It is, in May, it will be 30 years.
Oh, my goodness.
And I'm saying that because you look like you're about 30 years old. So you must have started very young. And actually, before we get going too much, I just want to say in 92 or 91 is when I started teaching. And I remember you were in one of my very first classes. I taught a 323 class, Broadcasting Society. And that's how I got to know you initially.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say I don't remember what grade I got. I'm sure it was excellent, right?
It was. I think we agreed upon your excellence at that time.
Only gotten better, let me tell you.
Okay, Mark. So let's update everybody. Where are you? What's going on in your life?
Yeah, so I'm out in Pittsburgh now. We've been here for quite a while. I should say that I married Karen Franks, who is now Karen Nootbaar. She was also in the communications department, kind of on the other side, but she did some broadcasting stuff as well. Anyway, we've been out here for quite a while. I was working in radio here. And then a few years ago, I decided, you know what? It's time to move on, let the younger kids come forward and do their thing. So I moved over to the University of Pittsburgh, where I'm a senior writer and editor, working in the philanthropy department. So raising money, trying to get scholarships for kids, and just keep the University of Pittsburgh going.
Absolutely, an important task for the university, as I know now, as I've gotten into the administrative side, how important it is to have good people there. And we'll talk a little bit about how some of the things you learned along the way and how you still have those in your tool belt in terms of skills that apply for your entire life. But we're going to go all the way back. You grew up in Park Forest.
Correct.
And I want to find out what it was like growing up and being in your family, because I think a lot of times, we're formed early on by our experiences and relationships. And so talk a little bit about your family and the impact growing up in that area had on you.
Yeah, well, growing up in the suburbs of Chicago was just a great experience. And it's something, I do carry that with me as well. I just like that kind of environment. It feels right for me. That's where we are now. We're in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, not unlike Park Forest, or at least the way Park Forest was back then. I'm sure things have changed. Communities always do. But one of the things that I really remember from childhood is that my parents listened to a lot of radio, and specifically a lot of WGN, which at the time was, all talk, all news, and very community, considering it was, a 50,000 watt blowtorch from a huge city. And that really got me thinking, I believe, about how you make those connections through radio. And then, of course, we listened to a lot of WBBM, all news. And so that really got me thinking about news. But it was being a DJ that I really wanted to do. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a DJ. I had a little tape recorder, and I would do, little shows, have some music, do the back announce, the whole thing. And so that was I was really focused on. Even in high school, we had a high school radio station. So I got on that right away, got my first class broadcast license that I still have in a box somewhere around here from that day. You can't get those.
FCC license, that's right, yeah.
FCC license. And so it just was always a passion from the time I was little, and I was able to pursue it at Western.
So what kind of music do you remember playing at that time? Was it music from that period of time? Were you into a different type of music?
Well, I had an older brother, so that got things a little bit screwed up for me. But probably Supertramp, Chicago, bands like that at the time, and then some jazz thrown in there. I was a trumpet player in high school, so some Maynard Ferguson, stuff like that. So It would have been an interesting station to listen to.
So at some point in high school, you must have decided that you were going to pursue this interest because You mentioned you're involved a little bit in music. Other things in high school that may have given you the inclination to go into broadcasting.
Yeah, having that student station was just such an amazing experience. And we tried to make it as professional as possible.
Yeah.
Tried to, have some sort of an idea what we were doing when we went into the show, had a playlist, knew what we were going to talk about in the breaks. We even tried to go out and get some sponsorships, tried to get some people to donate some prizes. It probably got, 3 or 4 listeners in the evening, but it was fun. And it really got me the taste, and, the bug was just in me. So when it came time to start looking at schools, while most people are saying, show me the dorm, tell me about your football team, I was saying, how does a student get on the air? Where can you be on the air? And the fact that Western had a strong student station that was a lot like a professional station, the way it was run with a general manager and assistant general manager, and the fact that there was an NPR station right there on campus that allowed students to work, I was sold. I said, that's the place I want to be. I want to get my hands on this and really do it.
So did you get involved right away? How early on did you start working at the radio station?
As soon as they had the open house, I was there. Yeah, absolutely. Wanted to be on, get an on-air shift right away. I think they were 2-hour shifts for students at the time. And then as you moved up, you could get a 3-hour shift in the evening, 3 or 4-hour shift in the evening. But not that you've asked, but I'll share anyway. It was when I was there that there was an opening. I was doing my DJ thing, and there was an opening to do one of the afternoon newscasts. And I thought, well, that'll be interesting. Well, I'll give that a try. I'll be a more well-rounded person. I'm already thinking somebody's going to have to hire me someday. I better have as many skills as possible. Started doing that news, which was just a little bit better than rip and read. We had some AP copy, added a few little things, stole something from the newspaper probably. And then I said, this is really where it's at. This is exciting. And then being able to take classes in news writing, being able to do television production, getting on at WIUM, it just really solidified that news is where it was for me.
That's interesting because back in that early, I'm sure Sharon Evans was involved with the newscast and Sam Edsel and I remember those early days of students putting in a lot of hours and trying to do the best that they can. And it's funny because I try to tell our students now the successes that we have with our television newscast really started back in those periods of time. There's a legacy of student achievement that began back when you guys were in the infancy, I think, at that period of time.
It was just going out to the town on cable. And I know it's a little bit different now, right?
Yeah, of course, everything now we still send it to cable, but we live stream it. It's just it's a different beast, as I'm sure you're aware of, trying to make it available to as many eyes as possible. So over at Tri-States, I'm trying to think of was Bill Wheelhouse? Bill
Wheelhouse was the news director at the time. Yeah, so he trained me up well, I think.
Oh yeah,
he had great chops, has great chops, right? Went on to do some other things. But when I think back to all of the students that went through his tutelage and the things that they've gone on to do, it's really amazing. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get into public radio after graduating as well. We can tell that story as we get to it. But seeing him as a teacher as well, he wasn't paid to be a teacher, he was paid to be a broadcaster, but he really took the time with the students and not only taught you the nuts and bolts, but also the ethics of it. And also just how you go about doing your job. And, that deadline is that deadline. You can't miss it. And I remember working late one night and some student was like, I'm done. I'm going home. I've put enough time in on this. Yeah. And Bill was like, you've already spent 4 hours or whatever working on this. What's another 15 minutes to get it right? And I've carried that through for a long time in my life. Just, you've already put the time in. What's another 15 minutes to get it right?
Well, I've always enjoyed that connection with Tri-States because, as you said, it helps train our young people into being professionals, into knowing how to relate to people within the community, whether it's a politician or it's a public official, how to cover a meeting, how to report the news, and how to, interact with, really for the first time for many of our young people, an adult that's not your parent.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So some of the other students that you might remember at that period of time, do you recall anybody?
Well, I remember Katie Lubovich, and I know you spoke to her
Katie
earlier.
Jill, yeah.
Yeah. Jeremy Spencer, who is down in Florida, still working
Yep.
in the industry. Those are a couple of the names that I know stayed in broadcasting in one sense or another. Oh boy, so many other names, and I'm drawing a blank as far as from WIUS and WIUM. Bill Abernathy and Laura Carley.
Oh yeah.
They were around, and some of the stuff that Bill was doing, I mean, he was really pushing the envelope, and maybe pushing you guys a little bit too much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But his excitement for it really was contagious to other people too.
Yeah. And Tim Abshire, I'm sure, was around at that period of time. Tim Crowley,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, Tim Crowley. Yeah. Maybe I misspoke. I meant to say Tim Abshire and Laura
Okay.
Carley.
Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize if I misspoke.
No, that's all right. No, it's been 30 years. And Mark, during that period of time, what other kind of things do you remember about Macomb and WIU? Were you in the dorms? Were you hanging out around the community?
Yeah, Thompson and Higgins. That's where I was. That was my hangout. So it's interesting to see one of them gone and the other one with big windows. That's spectacular. I would love to have those windows at the time. I remember it being just amazingly windy and amazingly cold.
Still is. Yep.
Yeah. And, the town was fun. I got to meet some people from the community, not just students. So that was nice to get out and meet some of the farmers and meet some of the people that are, that I covered, some of them doing the news, and others just happened to run into them. I was in the marching band. Nice. For 3 of my 4 years. So football weekends, that was a big part of my life. And just having way too much fun up on the square, that's for sure.
Yeah, as many people do in at WIU. So when you graduated, Mark, your first opportunity was to, I think, go to Decatur, Illinois for your first job. And I'm sure that first day on the job was tremendous. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, it was. That first day was an interesting day. So I'll just tell you, first of all, WSOY, AM and FM combo. FM was, music. The AM was news talk, had Dr. Dean Adele and things like that. And I was hired to be the afternoon anchor and evening reporter.
Okay.
So the news director brings me in on the first day and, shows me around the equipment and tells me, where this is, where to put my lunch, stuff like that. We get in his car and he drives me around Decatur, and he says, this is where the school board meets. This is where city council meets. This is, where you have to go to get this, blah, 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 blah. We come back to the station and he says, okay, there's a city council meeting in 2 hours. I expect 2 stories and an interview set up for me tomorrow morning. And he left. He was out the door. I'm like, what? Can't you, aren't you going to go with anything, something, help me out here? Well, he gave me the keys to the news car. He told me where it was, and I showed up. And because of my experience working at WIUM and my experience in all the different classes I had, I put together a story that was acceptable enough that he aired it, and got his interview lined up for him for the next morning. He had a live newsmaker segment that he did. But boy,
Mark, that is a make or break point. I tell you, a lot of people at their very first job would have said, I can't do it. I'm overwhelmed. What, this person has not prepared me. I'm out of here. And yet you had the wherewithal to stick with it.
It was either the wherewithal or the knowledge that I had signed a year lease somewhere. So I had to pay my bills somehow. But no, I mean, it was a freak out moment, but once you start doing it, if you've done it before, you can do it again. It's just different players and different subjects. And, it kind of reminds me of a saying that a cartoon that I ran across many years later, where, these guys are sitting in the newsroom in the bullpen or whatever, and they're throwing a dart at the board and they're saying, what am I going to be an expert in today? And that's really what news boils down to sometimes. It's great if you can have a beat, but when you're a general assignment reporter, or if your beat changes, you become an expert in whatever it is right away. You have to learn it. You have to ask the right questions, and then you have to send it back out to your listeners, to your viewers.
I totally understand. I worked in radio news for a few years and felt the same way, that you had to eventually something was going to come your way that you were not prepared for, and you did your best to study up and sound as educated as possible about that, including for a while, I was a farm director at a radio station.
Nice. But that's one of the reasons to go to a school like Western, where you have an economics class, where you're going to take a chemistry class. You get that well-rounded education. So when something comes at you and you have to read something technical, you have at least an inkling of what it means.
So how long were you in Decatur, and what kind of things were you learning there that prepared you for your next part?
I was there for about 4 years. Just learning how to cover absolutely everything. I was there at a really interesting time as far as labor goes. And it brought forward one of my favorite stories to tell. So at the time, A.E. Staley was on strike, ADM was on strike, and another small, Caterpillar, not a small company. They were all on strike at the same time. So it was just this really weird labor situation. So a lot of those stories. We were on a picket line. I wasn't picketing, obviously. They had set up a picket line to stop trucks from coming into the ADM plant. And I'm doing my live report, and the police are right here, and the protesters are sitting down right here. And one kind of stumbles into the next. Next thing you know, one of the police officers is falling over, pepper spray's coming out, and it's all beginning. And I'm doing this live on the air, and I'm watching this cloud of pepper spray come at me. And then that was absolutely the end of my broadcast. It was nothing but, coughing and wishing I had ducked out of the way sooner. But it was an exciting time to be in Decatur. Just a lot going on, something to report on every day. Both sides very mad at you if you did a down the middle of the road report. It was good times.
Wow. So during that period of time, you're learning a little bit more. That takes you then to Texas. Is that right? Is that the next job?
Yeah, next up was Corpus Christi, Texas. One of the main reasons why I wanted to move, obviously, I was looking to move up in market size. That's, what every broadcaster wants to do. But I wanted to get back to public radio. I really felt that public radio was the type of news that I wanted to do, a little bit more in depth, a little less beholden to any advertiser, things like that. Not that a news department always is, but there's always that kind of inkling in the back of your head. Right. Who's buying advertisement, who they are, especially in a community the size of Decatur.
Right.
So I wanted to get back into public radio, and that was my opportunity, was to go down there. I was the morning anchor down there, so doing morning edition, and then reporting in for the rest of the day. I was doing reporting. Very interesting time down there. As a guy who grew up in Park Forest, Illinois, moving down to a place where it's 51% Latino. I went to the first, they called it county judges meeting. So the first county board meeting. Went through, took my notes, went up to do the gaggle afterwards. First question comes out in Spanish and the answer comes out in Spanish. And I'm thinking, I'm sunk. What do I do? I had high school Spanish. That's the best I had. Well, I come to find out that they do the interview in Spanish, and then they turn to the English speaking media and do it all over again in English. But yet another freak out moment.
Yeah. You must have always had taken the hard road.
I guess so. Yeah. Always a twist.
Yeah, no, that's so that, and of course, that sounds like you're probably on the air very early every morning, right?
Yeah, I was out with the bread trucks. That was the only people that were out when I was driving into work. But it was, again, a great experience, learning how to get up at 3 a.m, get in there. You're the only person in the building. You're responsible for making sure that the news gets on the air, whatever it is, fixing whatever thing might be broken. And then you're halfway through the day and people are starting to trickle in. It's a good feeling. It's a nice gig to have, actually.
Anything else interesting happened while you were in Texas during that period of time when you're covering news?
I always wanted a hurricane to come through. I was renting an apartment, right? Rip the roof off. What do I care? Great news. And it just never happened. It went south. It went to the north. But I ate a lot of really good food, made some good friends. But the market was just a little bit smaller than I wanted. So I started to put out applications, and you'll probably already know, but the next step was Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, and that's such a much bigger jump. Did you have some sort of connection? How did you land that job?
I guess a lot of luck. I'm not sure. Maybe I interviewed well. I think actually probably the true story is I interviewed for an afternoon anchor job, and what they offered me was more of a midday position. So I think what happened is I was the number 2 guy, but they had another opening, so I got it. So maybe it was a lot of luck.
The fortune smile on you.
Yeah. But Pittsburgh at the time, and still is, a great market, a great city. I'd recommend it to anybody. But just really excited to move up here. Really excited to make that leap to a major market.
And so was this a public radio station or was this a commercial?
Yeah, this was also a public radio station owned by Duquesne University at the time that I came up here, WDUQ. University was mostly hands off, so we were able to just kind of do the things that we wanted to do. Medium-sized staff. We had a couple of anchors and a reporter, but we also really used a lot of student staff, a lot of student help. And one of the things that was great about it, and much like WIUM was when I was there, rather than just taking somebody on for a semester, having them look over your shoulder and then move them on out, we got the kids as young as reasonably possible, and then kept them for several years. And they wound up filing stories that would win AP awards. And that teaching of those students kept me honest as well, because they would ask you a question. You'd say, "This is how you do it," and they'd say, "Why?" And you'd have to stop and think, why is it that I do that? Other than the fact that somebody at Western taught me to do it this way. Why is it that we do it this way? So they kept me on my toes and maybe kept me young. I don't know, but kept it exciting. That's for sure. We did some really good work at WDUQ.
That's nice that you were passing that along, that you had benefited from during your time as an undergrad. Here you are helping others along the way in their own personal journeys.
Yeah, I think that's what we have to do, right? You have to pass it on to the next generation, because we're not going to be here forever.
During that period of time, you must have seen a president come through, or a candidate for president come through. What kind of interesting stories do you have during your time in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, southwestern Pennsylvania is a hotbed for presidential candidates. This is a place that can make or break Pennsylvania. And of course, we have a lot of electoral college votes. So I saw everybody come through, starting with George Bush, the second George. I saw the first George Bush in Decatur, and I saw the second George Bush in Pittsburgh. That was an interesting time because I had seen him as governor down in Texas, and we're in the gaggle after the event that he did. It was out at a manufacturing facility. We're in the gaggle, and he looked over at me and recognized me, which was just shocking. I couldn't believe it that he would remember me from Corpus Christi, Texas. But maybe that's just the kind of mind he has. But yeah, so Obama came through. Everybody came through at one time or another. covering their events can be a lot of hurry up and wait. The FBI is searching you down and sniffing your bags and everything. The dogs, not the FBI agents. And then the protesters outside are always fun to talk to. A lot more serious than you see on the Daily Show, but it's the same type of people. You're just looking for the more normal people rather than the crazies that they're looking for.
And during that period of time, you also had, for instance, I think you mentioned on 9/11. You want to talk about what you covered on 9/11 in that area?
Yeah. So Shanksville is not far from the city of Pittsburgh. And it was one of those days. I was doing assignment editing work at the time and then also reporting. And I had looked at everything to send our reporters out at, and there just was not much going on. It was such a quiet day. And I remember typing in my report to my news director that, it's just another quiet day in Pittsburgh. So quiet that I was going to go cover jury selection. Right?
Wow.
An upcoming big trial, but jury selection. I'm sitting in the courthouse and I start to hear rumors of a plane crashing just like we all did, start to hear rumors about a plane crashing and what's going on. My news director calls me and he says, "You've got to get back. You got to get back to the station." And I'm thinking, Kevin, this is a New York story. What do I care? And he's like, "No, get back." Got back just in time to see the first tower go down on the TV. And then we're told somewhere out in Western Pennsylvania, another plane has gone down. And so I grab another reporter, we jump in my car and start heading out in that direction. Had no idea really where we were going. Cell phone service wasn't that great along the Pennsylvania Turnpike at the time. So we're racing down the turnpike, big signs saying, "Do not go to New York, do not go to Washington, D.C." Get off in Somerset, Pennsylvania. That's where the exit was that we knew was close. I dropped my reporter off at what was being set up as a media area at the county courthouse. And then I said, I got to go find where this is. But I really still didn't know exactly where it was. Start driving out in the general direction where I thought I might be. And mile later, a cop car goes zipping past me. 2-lane road, he's doing 100. And I'm thinking, I'm going in the right direction.
Yep.
Right. I can't do 100, but I'm going off in the right direction. Way too long a story already, but turns here, turns there, finally figure out about where we are. And the FBI is already setting up a location. You can see over the hill from where we are, smoke still rising. So that's how early we were there. And then from then on, it was just day after day after day of stories from right there. And I was not able to send stories back like we could now, right? It would be easy. You open up your 5G and, zip it off from your cell phone. But I would drive back home every night to file my sound, because otherwise everything was just holding the tape recorder up to your cell phone and sending sound down like that. And I remember I was an expert, again, this idea of an expert. I was an expert of what was going on in Shanksville, but had no idea what was going on in the rest of the world. So it was that hour and a half, 2-hour drive back home, listening to other radio stations, where I really started to get a feel for what was going on in New York, what's happening in DC, what's going on in the rest of the world. And then the next morning, get back in the car before the sun came up and camp out and do the reporting one more day.
Wow. That's so interesting. I tell you, Mark, and you sort of gave a little bit into my next question, which was, over this period of time, technology continues to change in our industry. Obviously, I'm sure you went into it cutting tape or using a cassette tape recorder at some point in time, and how you had to continue to adjust to the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Cassette recorder at first in the field and reel to reel in the studio. I enjoyed cutting tape. It was actually really fun until you screwed it up, and then you were really in trouble. Do you remember having pieces of tape stuck to the wall? Like, here's a soundbite, I'm going to use it. I don't know when or how, but it's, I'm going to stick this to the wall. Can't label it or anything. So that was the first job, was still all analog, still everything on tape, cart machines. Went down to Texas and they had a digital audio distribution, a DAD system down there. And that was my first introduction to doing things digitally. Always enjoyed technology, so kind of jumped into it and started to see the freedom that you had. Thank goodness for the undo button. Right? You don't have that when you're cutting tape. You can't just hit undo. You got to try to put it back together. And then just watching it continue to evolve, and those systems getting better and more intuitive, and being able to do better mixing of sound, having multiple tracks. And then, what's the next step? The next step is putting it online. I have social media and I have email accounts that are just my name, not because I'm so cool, but it was because I had to learn how to do it for the radio station. So I was an early adapter for Twitter, for Facebook, for things like that. Because what do we do with this? I know Twitter is going to be big, but why? What are we supposed to do with this? How do we use this? So you got to get on, you got to play around with it. How do you do a blog? What is a podcast? And you just trial and error and hopefully figure it out and put something out there that's worth listening to, worth reading.
Over that period of time, there must have been a number of stories you must have taken some personal joy and pride in. What kind of stories do you recall that really you're proud to say you're associated with? Yeah,
two really stick out to me, and they're both more feature stories, not hard stories. We can talk about how hard stories, but they're not as fun. They kind of come and go.
Right.
But one that I really enjoyed doing, I was working on a series about entrepreneurship in Pittsburgh, right as 9/11 happened, which of course, threw everything into a tizzy as far as economics, and entrepreneurship changed very much. But we resumed that series not long after. And at the end of October, I was able to travel to Manchester, England, as part of this series and as part of a trade delegation. And it was actually the first U.S. trade delegation to go to Europe post 9/11. Just an amazing experience. And I was able to do some really good reporting from our sister city, Pittsburgh's sister city, which is Manchester, and then also expand out to all of the other countries that were coming in for this trade mission event. By then I was working off of a Mac laptop. Who knows how slow it was, by today's. And I remember trying to upload, I was trying to upload a 7.5-minute story, right? A public radio length story on a phone modem from my hotel room in Manchester. I started uploading it, went to dinner, came back, and it still wasn't done. But it got there. And thank goodness for the time delay, so that it was ready to go for morning edition the next day. I also remember I'm a person who over prepares. So not only did I have by then I was working on mini discs, right? So not only did I have one set of mini discs, but I had a second machine and way too many cables than I would ever need. And I plopped my suitcase up to have it x-rayed, and it goes through there with all these wires and big black microphones. They're like, wait, step over here, sir. This is going to be a long day for me, isn't it? It was a great experience, really good experience. And then the second story that really stands out, again, a series of stories. There is a bike and hiking path that runs from Washington, D.C. to Pittsburgh. And at the time, it was just really getting started. There were still gaps in it where you had to either get off the trail and onto the road, or off-road it, and all along these old bumpy tow paths and bumpy rail lines. But we did the entire trip. I did it with a support wagon to pick me up at the end of every day from the trail, interviewing people that were on the trail, interviewing entrepreneurs that were building hospitality along the trail, talking about the history. And every day we would put the stories up on the internet, which at the time was just, unexpected. So this was probably 2002, somewhere in that ballpark, 2002, 2003. And we had this little animated GIF, which now GIFs are cool again, but we had this little animated thing of where I was on the trail. But just a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
To be able to get out and experience biking like that, and still be doing the other thing you love, which is making great radio. And to this day, there are people that talk to me about, oh yeah, I heard that series, and that's what got me into biking on these rail trails.
Yeah. That is so cool that you actually did that. Did you have an interest in biking before that? I
enjoy doing all that type of outdoorsy stuff.
Yeah.
But it was the first time that I had paid, a few $100s for a bike.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and I still enjoy riding on rail trails today. It's something that you can do even when you're as old as I am. I'm not doing any mountain biking.
So let's talk about, at some point you decided, Mark, that that radio was just it wasn't the same job. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, one thing that happened is the station went from being university owned to being community owned, which is a wonderful thing in some regards, and then in other regards, it was not that great. So it was a really tough transition and tough to find the right leadership for it. So the station just started to feel a little bit different. But then I also started to realize that the way stories were being covered was just not the same way that I wanted to cover the stories. And I was just starting to feel, if you ever watch the movie or read the book Moneyball, there's all the old scouts sitting around.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, this is the third baseman because he's got a better whatever. And the new guys are sitting there saying, no, I've got this computer statistic and this is how you have to do it. And I just realized that either I'm that old curmudgeon or I'm actually doing this right. And I'm probably the old curmudgeon. So it's time to move on. There are always people that are more hungry, that are more excited about it, that are coming up behind you. And it was time for me to just let them take the reins of the station. I didn't need to be driving the machine anymore. And so that's when I decided to start looking around and see what else was out there.
And so you've got this great job with the University of Pittsburgh, where you still get to do a great deal of writing, I assume. And so talk a little bit about the skills that you were able to transfer from one position to the next.
Yeah. So the biggest skill is just simply being able to string together sentences and then figure out which sentence doesn't need to be there anymore, right? If you can tell a story and then tell it more succinctly, tell it in a shorter, clearer manner, you're going to be able to communicate in any field. And that's really what you learn to do when you're in broadcasting, right? Here's a bunch of information. How am I going to get it to my readers, my viewers, my listeners? And how am I going to do it in a way that they're going to get all the way to the end of the story, all the way to the end of the email or the letter, and then understand it? And so that's really the skill set that I bring. Also, I had a really good, wide understanding of many different topics. And when you're at a university the size of Western or at the size of the University of Pittsburgh, there are different types of stories all the time, right? From engineering to the theater, always something different to talk about. But the thing that I still love most about my job is I get to write often about people, about donors, and about students. And this will sound like bragging, and I guess it probably is, but sometimes you got to talk these people into being featured, right? Oh, I'd like to give money, but I'm not really worth talking to. But when you finally get them to agree to it, when it's all said and done, they say, you know what? That was a really good experience, because you get them talking about themselves. And what do we like to talk more about? Just like me right now, I'm talking about myself. What's better than that? And then when you put that together and they see the story that comes out of it, it's very gratifying to know that you've done something that makes them feel good and hopefully helps to raise money so that another student can get a scholarship, or a researcher can spend more time at his bench coming up with whatever the next great breakthrough is.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. It is this circular connection that you're making, not with the alumni of the university, with the current students and prospective students. I mean, it helps complete that entire circle, because they want to know. I mean, obviously, it's just like what we're trying to do here is we want our students to know about people like you that have come before them, the legacy of people that have come before them, because that helps them feel like they're in a good program. They feel good about where they're at, and then they continue the tradition, as you have done over this period of time, intentionally or unintentionally, with other people, about sharing your knowledge along the way. And that's the great part of higher education. I think that's what our real mission is about. It happens at different places. You've been doing it at different places around the country, but I'm so glad that you're still doing something like this. I think it's just terrific, and a great example, I think, for some of our students that think you don't have to do the same thing for the rest of your life.
Right. Very much so. Yeah. Find your passion and follow it for as long as it is passionate for you, and then go and do something else. And as somebody who has a writing background, a broadcast background, there's a lot that you can do out there. You can really take those skills and show them off elsewhere.
And how's Karen doing?
She's doing great. She is one of those people who likes to change what she does every once in a while. And so she's looking for some new opportunities right now. She's really excited about doing different types of art. And so that's something that she's exploring, some of her own art and working with some other artists. But she's got that communications background, and she knows how to communicate with others, how to put things in writing. And so she's always going to be fine. She's always going to be able to find a great job. She has not gone back to doing any Macomb magazine type talk shows, though.
Well, I'm trying to remember who it was. Roger Sadler, was he involved with the Macomb magazine at the time?
Yeah, Roger was running it, and it was Karen. Her co-host was Art Rubikava.
Oh yeah.
I think he's still in Philadelphia. I think he's working in Philly somewhere.
Yeah, that'd be terrific to. And I don't know when the last time you guys have been back to Macomb. It's probably been a number of years.
It's been a while. I would say probably, how time flies, probably about 10 years. Maybe we made a quick swing through in the summer.
Well, we'd love to see you again. If you ever make it back to the Chicago area and have an interest in coming down to the cornfields, we'd love to see both of you and catch up and show you around the old third floor of Sallee Hall, and show you all the facilities again.
You guys get any windows yet?
No.
Oh, okay.
I was over there for 25 years without windows, Mark. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, it's been great catching up with you. One last thing that we always like to ask is, what kind of recommendations do you have for current students on just, going through school or maybe that have an interest in broadcasting?
Yeah. For anybody interested in broadcasting, get a tape, right? Do the work. There are so many opportunities that I know that students have at Western to get hands-on experience, whether it's doing news, whether it's doing sports, whatever it is, and keep that tape, because that's what employers want. We can all show our transcript from our classes and say that we've gotten great grades. But it's really what you've put on tape that you can show them. That's what's going to make the difference. And then the other thing that I would just say is have a lot of fun. And if it seems hard, that's okay. That's you growing, and you're going to get through it one way or the other. Whether you sprint across or limp across, you're going to get across that finish line.
That's awesome. And I thank you for sharing not only your time, but sharing your journey with us, Mark. It's really remarkable. And I'm glad that we got the chance to reconnect. Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much. And all of our weekly viewers out there, we thank you for joining the podcast. If you are interested in being a guest on the podcast or want to recommend somebody, just send me an email. We want to hear from you. And we also want you to continue to watch and listen to our podcast and just generally appreciate your support. So until next week, stay safe, take care, and God bless.